Thank you all for joining. You're here to learn more about Walmart overages, so let's get into that. Today, you have myself. So my name is Allie Trong. I'm the lead Supplier Wiki researcher. I help organize the content, the articles, webinars, or ebooks that you're looking at. And then leading our content today is the wonderful Melodie Hayes. Melodie is the VP of Supplier Wiki. She has worked on pretty much a little bit of everything within SupplyPike. So really excited to have her.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about overages at Walmart. I'd love to see in the chat, maybe we can get our chat popping today. Do you guys experience overages? Do you guys currently bill for overages? Are you experiencing more overages on the SQEP side or on the kind of shortage side? Let us know. But if you're like, I know nothing about overages, Melodie, that's why I'm here today. We're going to be diving into that, and just please feel free to send some messages in the chat. Okay, so what are overages? They are kind of what it sounds like. So anytime that you are sending products to Walmart and they're receiving them versus what they have purchased, an overage is going to be an excess of what has actually been ordered. So if you're sending more product that is actually expected, that is what Walmart will consider an overage. And unlike other retailers, Walmart will not actually send you an invoice they will not give you money for any excess product. They'll just be like, hey, look, this is free product that you have sent me because I didn't order it. And so that's what we would consider an overage in regards to Walmart. Here is the actual Walmart definition. So any amount of inventory stock that exceeds the inventory that is expected. So any extra product than what is ordered, that is what Walmart considers an overage. Now, there's two ways of understanding overages. There are billable overages, and this is going to be kind of those shortage overages that I mentioned earlier. And there's overage fines. So Walmart has actually introduced a new program that we lovingly call SQEP here at Supplier Wiki, but also is known as SQEP, or Supplier Quality Excellence Program. So Walmart is actually now fining suppliers for any overages that they are seeing come through. So not only can you be losing money on kind of these billable overages or these shortage related overages, you can also be getting fined on it. So losing money because you're not getting paid for the product that has been sent to Walmart, and then losing money because you sent extra product to Walmart and they're fining you for that. So that can really hurt supplier's bottom line, especially in the case of these being invalid and actually Walmart's fault. We'll get a little bit more into that. But let me just make sure I covered the information. Yeah, Walmart isn't going to be paying for the extra items that they received, and SQEP. So they want to de-incentivize you from sending too much product and then billing for it later. What we do find though is that Walmart will sometimes be sending these overages or giving you overages in error. And so it could even not be your fault, which is really frustrating. Here we go. There's two common causes of overages. So there's true overages, and this is going to be a valid fine that you're receiving, or a valid overage, meaning that you have actually sent too much product than what was ordered. Most suppliers, I don't feel like do this, just from what I've seen, or knowingly do this, just because, why would you send product that you're not going to be able to get paid for, or you're going to receive a fine for. So this will happen, if you have an issue with maybe your case calculations or something like that. But usually what we see more of is shortage triggered overages. And so what happens is that if there is a PO number and there's only one PO per truck, or multiple purchase orders on a truck, they will short you on one of those purchase orders or one of those items, and they'll regard it as an overage on the other side. And I think we have more information on that here. So high level, there's true overages or shortage trigger overages as some of the two most common root causes for what you might be experiencing. Here are some reasons overages might occur. So shortages, what we've kind of talked about, POs being sent to the wrong DC, inaccurate demand planning. So if you think Walmart actually needs more product than what they've ordered, issues in Nova, that's pretty common. And maybe Allie can potentially send in the chat a link to our Nova and Item 360 webinars. So we have 2 recordings on that, and I think maybe I'm announcing it a little too soon, but we're doing a very fun series with One World Sync on Item 360 in February. So please keep an eye out for that. Really excited to do that with them. We'll be talking about all things with item setup and doing an Item 360 201. So keep an eye out for that. But it also can be an issue with labeling and packaging. So kind of what I've talked about with the cases, if your cases aren't set up correctly, then you might be sending too much product to Walmart. Which I think we also have a labeling and packaging webinar that we might be able to send in the chat. So check all of those out if these are some of the causes that you might be experiencing with overages. Great question for the chat. So what are other root causes of overages that your team has experienced? I have seen a couple of people sending a few things in the chat, which is so exciting. I love it when you guys engage with us. Someone currently has over $100,000 in overages, and they've done 2 test invoices. So that's great that you're going and billing for that. I know that Ryan will be able to help answer how long is the average time to get paid back on this. Tom is saying that he recently started billing for overages and seen success in receiving payments. That's great. This is kind of a trick of rebilling for overages. Not every supplier does. So I'm glad to see that you guys have been able to do that. Awesome. Okay, ripple effect from shortages. So this is a compound issue that will happen if there's an error in Walmart's receiving process and one of the DC's short orders results in an overage in another DC. So I don't know if you guys have ever had the chance to do kind of a DC tour. I have. It's been quite a few years since I've been able to do that. But the receiving process at Walmart is very manual. So you could even see this issue happening at a single DC where, they're receiving the product and they're manually scanning, a person is. They're like, oh, I actually only have, 8 cases of pomegranate juice. And when in reality, they have maybe 6 cases of pomegranate juice and 2 cases of orange juice. And so usually what we'll see is that there's just kind of a mix up because of the manual receiving process. And that can also happen at the DC level. So what we're seeing here is at DC 2035, there were 10 out of 15 cases delivered. And so you get a shortage fine on this. And then at DC 5340, there was 20 out of 15 cases delivered, which results in an overage. And so you're going to get fined twice for this, an AP deduction on the shortage for this order, and then you're going to receive a SQEP fine for the overage on this order, which can be pretty rough, which is what this slide is demonstrating to us. So an AP level deduction for a really great code for that is code 24. So that's going to be one of those shortages. You're going to see a SQEP fine of PO defect, and then you're going to have a OTIF fine, the on time in full fine, which is also going to impact your bottom line. And so your fill rate compliance is going to drop. You will not be paid for the unfilled units. And then in addition to the deduction, you're going to have a PO defect fine and the failure to ship in full, which is going to hurt your compliance score overall. I will say that, after talking to a few merchants, talking to a few buyers, OTIF fine, not only is the fine going to hurt you, but that is something that they will look at in regards to comparing you to potentially competitors. If it's a very tight race in terms of, cost, quality, you're pretty neck and neck with your competitors. Sometimes they will pull up your OTIF or in stocks in order to determine which vendor that they will move forward with. So OTIF even has more drastic impacts than just receiving something within itself, which is pretty scary. Okay, so how can overages affect your business? So as we've talked about, short shipping deductions, SQEP fines, and OTIF fines can be triple dipping into your pocket. So the really annoying thing about this, and the difficult thing for suppliers, and I'm sure most of you are working in, accounting or some regards to finance or maybe supply chain if you're on this webinar, and this means triple work for you. It's not even just triple fines, it's triple work for you because all of these systems are different. You have to dispute each of these individually, which just can cause a lot of work for you to go and have to prove over and over and over again that this might be an error in order to get your money back. But these are the different kind of codes that you'll actually see, or the different kind of programs in the actual codes or defect type. So what we have here is the deductions. I mentioned that code 24. If you guys are not familiar with the very specific codes, we actually have an entire ebook, our Walmart deduction guide explained, which talks about each of the different codes that Walmart has, what they are, how to dispute them, if they can be disputed. So check that out. But for AP level deductions, you'll usually see these short shipping codes, which are these three most common ones, but you'll also see this kind of merchandise code, and we'll talk about code 95 here in a second. That can also be something that you might see in regards to overages. OTIF, so the on-time in full program. This is the in full piece of it, and you're not OTIF compliant. And like I said, that can have ramifications outside of just receiving a fine, or can actually impact your relationship with your buyer. And then we have the Supplier Quality Excellence Program, which this is going to be the overage fine and is part of phase 1. We do have a lot of content around the SQEP program. 1 through 3, the SQEP has been actually rolled out in phases over the past year to 2 years. I'm trying to remember when exactly it came out, but recently. So we are up to phase 3 out of 4. So they haven't announced phase 4 yet, but as soon as we have that content and we have any insight into that, we will be informing you guys and rolling out the red carpet for this new phase. But the overage piece of SQEP of phase 1 is what can be impacting you here. Okay, so short shipping deductions. So the 3 codes that I've mentioned, we have code 22, 24s, and 25s. And again, that ebook is going to have a lot of really great information on there on everything about these codes. So check that out. I think we also even have a shortage specific webinar, which is an hour worth of content just to address these codes. So code 22, this is going to be whenever the quantity of the item on the invoice does not match the quantity of what the facility says that it's received. Does the receiving, what has been received, match up what is actually on the invoice, versus a code 24, which is very, very similar. I will see code 22s and 24s used almost interchangeably, but very similar cause for the same reason. It's whenever a shipper invoices, so you bill for more than what has been received or what is actually on the purchase order. So when your invoice is not matching up with your purchase order versus code 22 is invoice doesn't match up with just what has been received. And then in code 25 is actually going to be whenever Walmart says that they haven't received anything for what has actually been invoiced. Usually that's going to be an EDI error. Again, we have a lot of information on this, but go and check out that short shipping or that ebook, that short shipping webinar or that ebook that goes over the different codes, because we go into depth on how you can kind of prevent that if it is an EDI error. Awesome. So OTIF fines. So OTIF, Walmart expects a 98% fill rate for any non-compliant cases. And if if any of those cases are in non-compliance outside of that 98%, they're actually going to be fining you 3% of what the cost of goods sold are for that. OTIF fines are actually disputable through high radius. So you can actually go and dispute these. This is a very new thing. It's been released within the past year that you can go and dispute that actually through a program. Before you had to go through your buyer. And we have another webinar on that, so check that out. But you can go and dispute those. Best practices is you need to be able to forecast sales to anticipate what Walmart needs in the future. I know this is kind of like, Melody, that's easier said than done. I know, but over communicate if you are experiencing any in full OTIF fines. And again, we talk a lot about this in some of our other content. So go check that out if you have any questions or if this is something that you're specifically dealing with. Yeah, Allie?
Hey, Melody, I know you said save questions for the end, but I think this one's pretty quick. So Raquel asked, so we get an OTIF fine if we're late or early, correct, with OTIF fines?
Yes, you will. Do you want to talk about that, Allie?
I'm sending our OTIF 101 webinar, which kind of goes into it more. We've got some articles on that as well. I know we're focusing on overages, so I don't want to get too into the weeds because I can do that. But yes, you have to hit your correct date for that. So unfortunate, but yeah, for late or early. So
yeah. And that's the must arrive by date. So the MABD, which we're showing here, and we're talking about the window. Don't feel like you have to screenshot this because we do have all of this information that we'll be sending you into the deck afterwards. But that webinar that Ellie is talking about is going to be a great resource to explain kind of the ins and outs of OTIF. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, and I feel like I've done this webinar a few times now, and I always feel like in this webinar, I'm pointing to a lot of different pieces of content because overages are so complex. They're so complex and they can impact so many different programs. And this is kind of an introductory into overages. So, if you guys feel like, man, I'm not getting exactly what I need from this, it is, or I don't know where to even start with overages, this is a good place to start, but it would be worth going and digging into some of the other content that we're talking about here today. Okay, so SQEP fines. So like I've mentioned, this is the newest compliance program that Walmart has rolled out. They are disputable through high radius. That is something that you can do. We do, again, have more content on SQEP, but high level, there's 4 phases. Phase 4 hasn't been rolled out yet, but phase 1 is over PO accuracy and advanced shipping notices. Phase 2 is over barcode and labeling. Phase 3 is over load quality, label quality, and packaging. And phase 4, which hasn't come out yet, but will come out soon, is on scheduling and transportation. So all of these are quickly adding up for suppliers. I know whenever we first, SQEP first came out, we were doing some benchmarking on how it was impacting suppliers. And at the time, it was only about $1,000 a month on average that it was impacting suppliers. That has drastically changed. Usually with SQEP fines, they're going to mostly be valid and mostly be caused by maybe an issue in your supply chain. So usually what we suggest with SQEP is actually focusing on prevention and root cause for that. But there are some things like overages, very specifically, that typically are invalid if you're experiencing a lot of those. A lot more content on that, so please go check that out. Phase 1 defects. So this is specifically, again, with the SQEP program. Overages are specifically stated as SQEP defects. Phase 2 and phase 3 can also contribute to overages whenever the product is not marked correctly for the DCs to process the received inventory. So these are kind of the standards that they have for inbound receiving. You can see overages up here at the top. There's a lot of rules that Walmart has around its packaging and labeling. I don't know if you guys have seen that massive, I think it's like a 200-page document for packaging and labeling. It's big. It's a thick document, and I know that it can be a little overwhelming. We also have kind of a cheat sheet and an additional content on that if you guys want it broken down. But this is SQEP. Okay, so let's talk about preventing and disputing overages. Now that we've kind of covered, which programs might be impacting your business, let's get into kind of the deep root cause and talk about how we can actually go and dispute these and recover some of your money. So fighting overages, you can invoice your retailer for the excess goods. So that means you're going to need a new invoice. You're going to need to invoice Walmart. You're going to need to reference the original product order number specifically and only include the overage amount, but not the other cases in the original order. So that means don't go and just resubmit the same invoice. You're going to need to invoice for just the excess goods. So your invoice might be rejected, but then you can go and so you submit that invoice, it might get rejected, but then what you will do is you will actually go and dispute through APDP that rejected invoice. So you're kind of having to do double the work just for a single AP deduction. This is where we've seen kind of the most success for suppliers, the process. So this is kind of the workflow that we suggest. So first step is finding out you have an overage, going and researching that, identifying what you have, and then invoicing Walmart. So you go and invoice Walmart, and hopefully Walmart pays the entire invoice. But if they don't, if they actually submit a deduction for all or some of the invoice, you then will have to kind of start that research process again of organizing your proof documentation. Usually this is going to be a BOL or a POD, and then disputing that deduction. So again, might be double the work for a single overage, but this is how you can get your money back. Here are some DSS reporting tips for proof documentation. Now I know DSS is going away. I don't know if anyone had the joy or the opportunity to go to the RLUG meeting yesterday on Luminate. So for those of you who are not aware, DSS is going away. It is getting replaced by Luminate. That should be happening. Allie, correct me if I'm wrong. It's either March or May, sometime in the spring.
Yeah, Melody, I believe it's March. I'm sending our article covering kind of the high level details on that now in the chat if you want to read more.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paul said March 1st. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So it is going away, but up until that point, you can still use DSS. We will be having webinars coming out that are going to be covering Luminate. So use this up until March 1st, until Luminate goes away, but we'll have additional content on how to do this inside of Luminate whenever it comes closer to that. So for a true overage, you're going to want to actually pull an inventory receipt report to verify how much product Walmart says was received. And I think we have the DSS report or recipe here in a second. So hold on for a second for that. And then whenever you're disputing, you're going to want to provide both invoices. So the original one and the new one that you go and bill for, the BOL, so that bill of lading. So any of that shipping documentation that you have, and your must arrive by a date report with all of the rows of the overages and the shortages highlighted. So where someone can see like, here is where an overage happened. Highlight that, provide those. I mean, it might even be 4 documents because you have both invoices, the BOL and the MABD report. But we'll get to that DSS report here in a second. And one thing to note, I went too far. This is for a true overage. So if you have a shortage triggered overage, you're going to have kind of a different report tip or different proof documentation tip. So here you're going to use that MABD report fields from DSS. So you're going to want to understand when the POs are shipped to the DC, there might be that shortage uncovered or shortage triggered overage that we talked about in the beginning. You're going to want to tie that shortage claim to the overage and show that it was actually received, and so that they know how much that they actually should be paying back. You're going to want to add fields to that overage shortage report by taking the quantity received minus the quantity ordered. So if an item is short, it will have a negative quantity. So for example, a -10. And if there's an overage, you're going to want to have a positive number. You're really wanting to, whenever you're disputing something inside of APDP, is make it as easy for Genpact, which is the third party dispute reviewer for Walmart, as easy as possible. So whenever they're looking at your case by case basis, they can just quickly understand exactly what's going on. That's what's going to make your profit potentially expedite you getting paid back. Now, the only reason I'm laughing at that is we have seen since Walmart has moved away from the settlement program, which is no longer, I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, and moved everyone into mass dispute creation or APDP. The settlement no longer exists for suppliers. Everyone has to dispute individually. We have seen the time that it takes to dispute increase significantly. Genpact and Walmart has gotten overwhelmed with the just amount of deductions and amount of disputes that are coming in. And so it has been taking longer for suppliers to actually go and receive money back on their disputes. Now, we do have benchmarking data on that. I don't think it's in this webinar, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. But if anyone's curious about that, we can send you kind of how that has changed over time. We are now seeing some suppliers get paid back for disputes that they submitted in February, just pretty significant change from where it was at before. So if your disputes are taking longer, you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. We're seeing that kind of across the industry. Okay. So this is just the deduction dispute workflow, and that webinar that Allie sent in the chat on shortages, it's going to cover this in really great detail. So check that out if you have any questions, but just high level, you're going to want to review your deductions daily or weekly, research those items, kind of do a validity check. So decide like, okay, is this actually a valid dispute? Like, did I actually do this? And did my company do this? If it is, I'm going to want to write it off, learn and communicate, talk about some of prevention aspects in order to stop these deductions from happening, because Walmart is probably not going to pay you back on that. Or if they do, pay you back on the valid deductions, you're going to have a post audit probably come in and say, nope, this deduction was actually taken correctly. And that's just making double work for you. So this validity check, some people will go and just dispute everything, but it might end up creating double work for you if you're just going and disputing everything, if it's valid or invalid. Now, if it's an invalid deduction, you're going to want to actually organize that proof. So that's, if you're talking about shortage deductions, again, that's your shipping information, that's your check, that's your invoice, all of that. You're going to put it together, and you're going to actually want to dispute through APDP, which is if I haven't mentioned this, the accounts payable dispute portal in Retail Link. You can submit it through that. Okay, now let's talk about OTIF. OTIF is a little bit different because, Walmart doesn't always make it the easiest for you to get your money back. But OTIF dispute process is going to reoccur on a monthly basis. You can actually dispute that in high radius if the fine has been issued. And you can actually get OTIF fines reversed with your buyer. But we suggest to use that very sparingly. So you will only really want to do that if it's a very, very high amount that's going to have a drastic impact to your business. And your one thing we say a lot here is your mileage may vary because depending on the buyer, they may not want to touch OTIF fines at all. And they may not even get back to you. So your mileage may vary if you're actually wanting to go and dispute with your buyer. But this is kind of the workflow that we suggest. So check your OTIF scorecard weekly. download that for your own historical reference. See if there's any projected fines that have been detected. If there has been, you're actually going to want to go and dispute that in HighRadius and gather the proper documentation. Just look in HighRadius for approval and then ensure payback in HighRadius. This is very, very high level. We go into it much more detail in that OTIF disputing webinar that Allie has linked out to in the chat. So check that out. Okay, now here is the SQEP disputing workflow. So this is, again, going to reoccur on a monthly basis. The key thing to understand here is what are the phases and what do the defects mean to best dispute. So review your SQEP scorecard for projected fines. I kind of suggest reviewing this weekly, but it's really up to the size of your business. If it's a phase 1, then you're going to want to review in the chargeback summary. If it's in a phase 2 or 3, you're going to want to review in fix it and chargeback summary. Again, do that validity check. Is this a valid fine that I'm receiving? If it is valid, just write it off. Again, talk about that learn, that communicate, talk about prevention. We do see quite a few SQEP fines that come through that are valid. And so the best way to make sure that you're not experience this revenue loss is to go and try to prevent those from happening. But if it's invalid, you're going to want to organize your proof and dispute in HighRadius or fix it, depending on what type of charge it is, what type of fine it is. And again, at the end of the day, just kind of talk about any of that prevention, if there is any. We've seen with SQEP charges that sometimes they can be obviously invalid. I think Ken from GNC, we had him come in and he taught an entire class on SQEP. And one thing that he mentioned is that suppliers will sometimes see their the photos and fix it come through, and it's not even their product that is being sent to them as proof for the fine that they're receiving. And so you can go and actually, raise red flag for those and say, hey, this isn't even my product. And usually what will happen is it will just disappear. That fine will just disappear. So go make sure you're looking at it at least, because even though most of the fines that have come through, we have seen have been valid, there are definitely times that they are wrong. So, okay, let's talk about some of the ways to prevent SQEP overages. This is something that we suggest quite a bit, and I know it's not possible for every supplier, again, depending on the size of your business, but we have seen some suppliers actually have really great success of just differentiating between the boxes that they're sending. Because again, of that manual aspect of the warehouses, just making sure that if they are different, if it's a mixed pallet, if you're sending kind of different items on a single pallet, that you're really calling to attention that they are different items. That's going to avoid some of the potential receiving errors at the Walmart warehouse. Check your EDI. So make sure that your information, your fulfillment information is actually being sent correctly. This is one of those silent killers I feel like some suppliers run into, or like, why am I receiving so many? Why is none of this working correctly? Just because EDI is not something that most of us think about. So just go and check in on that. That's a good thing to at least knock off your list of troubleshooting, what you're experiencing. And then confirming that your items are set up correctly. This is one of the ones that I feel like hit suppliers the hardest, is just your items are not set up correctly in item 360. So go and check that out. Make sure that you have the right pack size, make sure that you have the right quantity in for everything, because this can really hurt you. Now, how to dispute, you submit in HighRadius. You're going to want to look for, again, those shortages that match an overage. If it's correct, if this is correct, talk to your buyer or dispute that shortage at overage in HighRadius. And then that DSS data that you probably are going to be using for that AP, the AP deductions, the AP shortages or the overages, you can use that same DSS data to match it up with invalid overages. So you can usually use the same proof documentation across all three of these different programs. It's just, I find a little frustrating to have to use the same information in three different places for this singular error. Okay, let's talk about rebilling for overages. I'm going to move a little faster, you guys, but how do you get repaid for overages? So you're going to pull that report in DSS. And if we don't have this in the deck, I think we do, but I'll make sure that we send that recipe. Let's look. Oh, here you go. It's the next thing. So pull this recipe in the next slide for your inventory received. Determine what orders have actually been received over. You can use Walmart's WebEDI. If you're a smaller supplier or a newer supplier, WebEDI is just kind of that free EDI program that Walmart allows for you to have, or your other invoicing service to rebill Walmart. So transmit that to Walmart, make sure that you're getting paid, and then watch for those repayments and deductions in APIS. Usually you're going to get a deduction for it. So you're going to want to go and it's going to be that code 25 that we were talking about, but watch for deductions. And then you're going to want to go and dispute that deduction. So this is that retail link recipe in DSS. Again, don't feel like you have to screenshot this. We will send you this deck afterwards. Whoop. We will send you this deck afterwards that you can go and build this report for yourself. So here are the columns, vendor number, time range, stores, all of that stuff. Okay, you're going to want to determine which orders are signed over. So this is an example of kind of that report. Again, highlight it. Just make sure that you're making note of where those errors are happening. Compare the quantities that were invoiced for in APIS. So this is the accounts payable inquiry system in Retail Link. Compare that data and make note of anything that might be an overage. Here's an example of how you can rebill for Walmart in WebEDI. So this is what WebEDI looks like. If you guys use it, you can actually go and create documents in this. It's going to look different depending on if you're not using WebEDI on how you're going to bill for that. And best thing is just contact either your EDI provider, or if you have an ERP set up, talk to someone on your team. Okay. Watch for deductions. I know I've said this a few times, but Walmart tends to pay the new invoices in full. So it's about 60 to 90% of the time, depending on you as a supplier. Again, mileage may vary, but some will have deductions on them for the whole invoice. So this is going to be that code 25. You're going to want to dispute any of those deductions by providing that same kind of proof documentation that you kind of gathered in the beginning to determine if this was a valid or invalid overage. What do you got for me, Allie? What do you got for Ryan?
Yeah, let's get into it. I've sent a lot of resources in the chat before we get into questions. These are some of our other resources. You can find those on Supplier Wiki, but I've got so many questions for you guys. I'll go ahead and start with the ones in the Q&A. First comes from Nicole. And by the way, Ryan, great to have you on. It's awesome whenever you can come on and share your expertise. The first question being, is there a way to dispute an overage if you have a BOL that states that you did not send extra cartons?
So I can take this one, and hello, everyone. Happy to join. So yeah, when you are, if you're wanting to invoice, so there's two things. If you're wanting to invoice for an overage and you believe Walmart has received an excess of goods compared to what you've billed for, then in that case, when you submit the invoice, you do not actually have to submit proof with that EDI invoice. So even if the shipping doc doesn't necessarily back up sort of the claim or the story, if Walmart's own receiving data is indicating that there was an overage, then in most cases, that's exactly what their accounts payable team is going to look at when you send that invoice. And so regardless of the shipping doc, because you're not sending that as part of the invoice, you can still get paid back on that billing for that overage invoice.
Gotcha. Okay. That is helpful. And let me know, Nicole, if you have follow-up questions to that. Other questions that we've got on here. Zach asks, we have some overages from shipping canceled orders. We work with Walmart USA, and I've been told that they do not support the 860 file, which I assume is an EDI 860. That will let us know changes made to orders. Zach asks, so his question is, how are other vendors figuring out if Walmart has canceled an order?
That's a great question. I'd be curious if anybody on the call too has some experience in going through that process. Yeah, I know that Nova is really the primary app right now where you're going to make changes to POs. And if you yourself want to cancel or edit a PO, Nova is kind of that primary app to do so. It would also give you kind of statuses of POs as well. So in theory, you could be kind of monitoring that for PO statuses, but that does require you to kind of go out and look for it rather than sort of being notified of Walmart canceling a PO. So definitely curious if anybody on the call has any tips or tricks, but Nova you can run some reports in Nova too. And I think that's a good spot to see sort of PO status. So that might be a place to start if you haven't looked in there for that canceled order.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. That's where my mind was. Ryan is looking in Nova. And the second piece of that is we know that there's also going to be a release in Supplier 1, a application that Walmart is currently working on that will have some of the same data. So not sure if that's going to make Nova replaced by the Supplier 1 applications, but just know that I would check first in Nova, and then second, if your company has access to the beta of Supplier 1, there may be some data in there too. All right, gonna go into some of the other questions that we've got. The first being, let's see, I'm looking at the chat, so just trying to scroll up to the top that we have here. Stephanie mentioned that she has a lot in overages currently, and they've done 2 test invoices but have not seen any movement. How long have you seen in your experience, Ryan, that these take to get paid?
Yeah, so great question. Really, from sort of the way I describe it is Walmart will pay these overage invoices in the same timeline that they're paying just your average typical invoice. So it's the same team, and whether, it's sort of a secondary invoice on a PO or it's just your primary invoice for a regular PO you filled, they kind of review and pay those invoices in the same process, same timeline. So basically within your payment terms. Often within 30 to 60 days, you should see an outcome on that invoice that you send.
And just to follow up there, Ryan, because I know that this can happen. Let's say that, you're getting to the end of your payment terms and you're not seeing a payment come through. How can you escalate that?
Yeah, so I would say that the Enterprise Business Services team, or EBS, they used to be called Global Business Services, that team can sometimes help with payment. Sometimes they're helpful if you're waiting for an approved deduction to be paid back, or in this case, potentially an invoice payment. So I know we've got methods stored to reach out to them that we can share, but that EBS team is a good team to escalate that to.
Yeah, I'd agree. Okay, let's see. We've got some more questions in the Q&A. I love that you guys are engaging today. This is awesome. Tom asks, do you need to dispute OTIF or SQEP fines before the charges have been deducted from a payment from Walmart?
Yeah, so great question as well. I agree. So there's kind of 2 sort of milestones in the timeline that you might consider when disputing OTIF or SQEP charges. The first milestone is when Walmart issues the invoice because these OTIF and SQEP fines are actually invoices from Walmart, or sort of AR fines is kind of how we describe them. And initially you get invoiced, you can see those invoices in high radius. They usually happen about 1 month after the Walmart month ends. So that's the typical timeline. If you want to try and get the fine waived before that fine actually becomes official, sometimes historically there's been past where you can reach out to your buyer, you can talk to your replenishment manager or supplier solutions manager. If you want to try to sort of get it waived before it hits, then reaching out to those before that invoice is issued would be the process. Or more recently, Walmart started supporting high radius disputing. And so if you're going to actually dispute the official fine, it doesn't matter whether Walmart's deducted it from a payment, but it does matter whether they've issued the fine at all. And if they have, it will be in high radius. And then you can go into the Walmart high radius portal, select that invoice and dispute there. So that's the sort of timeline.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And just to clarify, if this is your first time hearing the phrase high radius, that's a separate portal from Retail Link. So you'll need to get access to that. And we've got some documentation on how you can do that as well. Mike asked, will fines apply to Walmart short receiving in the first place, finding that inventory week later and receiving as overage on another PO?
Yeah. So we definitely see scenarios where Walmart, I'm sure everyone on the call has seen misreceiving outcomes that they've observed from Walmart. A couple of those scenarios are exactly what was just stated. Sometimes a single truck might have multiple POs on that truck, and Walmart may be unloading that trailer and, identify some cases or goods they were actually meant for PO number 1 and sort of receive those on PO number 2. And in that scenario, you have PO number 1 is short now and PO number 2 is over. And if you're a collect supplier that goes through Centerpoint, then sort of the range of POs that might be related, where an overage shortage could be related, increases. So it's definitely possible that, one PO could be short, another PO could be over, and that's directly related. Sometimes we also see items mixed up within a single PO. So, one item is over, another item on the same PO is short. So that can also happen. I don't know. I might have missed the question there, but we definitely see that scenario happen. So happy to add more context or if needed.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that, Ryan. And Mike asked the question. So Mike, if you've got more follow-ups, we've got some time. We are nearing the end of some of the questions that we've got. I've got about 3 more in the queue. So if you guys have them, get them in early because we'll have Ryan here for a couple more minutes. So Karen asked, when invoicing for overages, should you use the original invoice number or the new one?
Yeah, great question. Our recommendation would be to use a new invoice number. You still want to bill for the original purchase order number because that PO is where the overage occurred. But as far as the invoice number, we would strongly recommend you to use a new one that helps you with tracking payment for that invoice, and as well as any deductions. It kind of keeps it separate. Sometimes we see suppliers just add a 1 or a 01 or something simple to the end of the original invoice number. So those would be options for you.
Perfect. Another question we've got here, kind of back to some of the things we were talking about earlier. How long do you have to dispute an overage? What's the time frame there?
So yeah, if you want to sort of invoice for the overage, then typically what we're saying is that you have about 2 years, and we've seen successful invoicing of overage going back 2 years. Walmart doesn't officially describe that timeline because this is kind of a process that you only know if you know, and they don't really talk you through it. So We haven't exactly seen official documentation on it, but we have seen going back 2 years to orders that old, seeing success on invoicing for those overages. So that at least should give you a pretty big window to go after.
Awesome. Yeah. 2 years, definitely worth investigating. Last question I've got here for you, Ryan, and then we'll get into the product sneak peek, is Paul asked a little bit about challenges with Walmart DC misreceiving and driving overages. So could you kind of speak to what those challenges are from what you've seen, as well as some best practices to mitigating those?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about those scenarios of Walmart kind of mixing up goods across POs or within a PO. It's hard to sort of fix Walmart's receiving processes on your end. But number one, you want to recover as much of that as you can. If Walmart was at fault and you shipped it, then go through these processes we described in the webinar to get sort of fully paid for what you deserve. So that's sort of step one. If in terms of trying to prevent it and maybe reduce that problem going forward, there are some things you could consider with packaging to try to better differentiate your packaging, especially if you're seeing certain items that are maybe being mixed up between over and short. Take a look at the labels, the box colors, the sizes, anything. Some suppliers put stickers on the sides of their boxes. Obviously, a lot of those things have costs associated with it, so you have to sort of weigh the cost benefit. But if you can make sure that your items are clearly, packaged and labeled and differentiated, that can reduce these receiving errors on the Walmart side. So things in your packaging like that to make sure everything's clearly labeled, separated, can help drive that down as much as you can without sort of being in the Walmart DC to help them unload successfully.
Don't you wish, though, Ryan? Don't you wish we could go in there sometimes and just help out a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's the questions we have. And to the last question that Ryan answered, I did share our Walmart secondary packaging guide webinar in the chat. So go and look at that one if you are having issues in that area, because we do go in deep of Walmart's documentation on that. Ryan, thank you for jumping on and answering all these questions. Much appreciated. And I'm seeing that reflected in the chat and the Q&A too. So we really appreciate it. And Melodie, thank you for leading us through the content. We're going to go ahead and transition now into the product preview. So Ryan's actually going to share his screen here in a second, and he's going to show us some of the new features that we've got on SupplyPike for Walmart. So Ryan, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Allie. And so I will get my screen shared and we'll go over some of the capabilities. I think we just got about 5 minutes allotted for this. So we'll keep it high level. There's definitely way more that we won't be able to see. But, as we talked about, we want to be able to help you recover everything that you're owed. And, obviously that spans AP deductions. It spans compliance fines with OTIF and SQEP, post audits, billable overages that you may be eligible for payment on. So sort of across the gamut, we've got options and support for that. And you can kind of see that on the left side, all these options that we won't get to today, but a lot of different rev loss scenarios, so to speak, where we can help you recover those dollars and help you pinpoint some drivers into why you got some of these in the first place to help you lower those fines and deductions. So I'll quickly show you guys a couple of different areas, starting with our AP deductions solution here. So you can see at a glance on our dashboard, we do a lot of categorizing your deductions overall with some sort of high level KPIs like win rate, what's in progress. And this deductions by status gets even more granular. You can see what's been kicked back to you, what's on Walmart's side, what's not yet disputed. paid back, denied, all of the sort of possible states that deductions and disputes can get into. So you have a very quick high-level glance of that. We break your deductions down from different perspectives so you can have a clear picture of, what you're receiving and why. So you can see by sort of claim code what you're experiencing sort of in terms of volume, dollar amount. We have great help information to learn about what each of these codes are. Can they be disputed? What documentation do you need? How to dispute and prevent these? So a lot of different breakdowns here. We just released this root cause feature, which is our attempt to show you root causes on deductions. And this is so new, we don't even have any data in our demo company yet. But that's to help you sort of get better and reduce these deductions as well. Breakdowns by item and Walmart DC. So a lot of different ways to look at your deductions. Super quick, you can see all of your individual deductions. You can do things like bulk dispute. We have automatic disputing where you don't have to actually take any action at all. You just turn on auto disputing. We can dispute it all. We have automatic document retrieval to go out and get your shipping docs and attach those to the disputes. So that is our deductions tool in a very quick glance. Way more we could go into on another day, but I did want to show you one other thing, which is our billable overages solution, which is fairly newly launched, although we have been helping suppliers get paid on overages for some time now. And so the idea with this is we talked about all those processes to identify your overages. We go out and get all of this data, compare invoices, receiving data, payment data, deduction data, and do all the math for you so we can spot the POs where there's opportunity to bill based on Walmart's own receiving data and present that in a very simple table of what kind of the opportunity is. All you have to do is sort of select the time period and you get a clean overage Excel report. And that will get you everything that you need to create and submit invoices to Walmart. You still have to do that part on your own because that is an EDI process, but we give you every data point you would need to create and submit those invoices. And then you get paid within that 30 to 60 day window. And we also track your overage payments right here as well. So we'll automatically track those payment outcomes on the overage invoices you submit. And you've got detailed payment reports as well. So everything's sort of right here, identified and sort of served up to you to where the only thing you need to do is submit these invoices and hopefully sit and watch payments come in. Which we've seen and helped a number of suppliers with. So hopefully that was helpful with the demo, and I'll end the share here.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Melodie, for helping us through some of the content today. Ryan, thanks for answering questions and going through the demo. We appreciate it. I can share our emails in the chat here in a second, or Melodie can throw it up on the screen. But just wanted to say, if you guys have more questions or need to get in contact with us, we'd love to chat with you guys. Really appreciate you joining and asking all those great questions, and hopefully you left with something that you've learned today. So appreciate all of you. And go ahead, Melodie.
Before we go, Nick, I do see your question of I get deduction claims through a different company. Can I sign up just for the overage module? We currently do not offer that separate from our product, but you can always do a deduction analysis with us. And if you decide that you don't want to move forward or use, I guess, the deduction piece, our pricing does scale on the size of your business. So even if you use the deduction disputing through another company, we can still help you with the overages and kind of look at what the ROI would be for you. So we don't offer it separately, but that doesn't mean that you have to use all of our products. Awesome. Okay. Well, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks so much, Allie. Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it. But I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.